Welcome to the Town Talks, the show where a panel of students from Oakland talk to Oakland icons about all things Oakland. We are here at Fremont High School, and our guest today is rapper, producer, screenwriter, director, and activist Boots Riley. Our host today is Richie Nunez. Take it away, Richie.
Thank you so much, everyone. Before we get started, I just want to thank Fremont High School for having us. I want to thank KDOL, Oakland in the Middle, La Segunda, and of course, I want to thank Boots Riley for being here with us today. Gloria, why don't you just drop us our first question?
Right. Hi, I'm Gloria.
Hey.
So my first question is, what do you think brings Oakland its beauty and color?
There's such a rich history here that has to do with migrations during, during World War II, and even back to, the Ohlone peoples, and the history that still lives in of those traditions here, and of course and of struggle, right? Things that people fighting back, and one thing that doesn't necessarily get talked about a lot is from those combinations of folks, and people more recently, even though more recently being from other places that may be more rural or whatever, it's always been more friendly in Oakland. Like, we get a lot of stuff put out there about the supposed crime wave, which is actually a false narrative, because crime is lower than it was 20 years ago and way lower than it was 50 years ago. But there's always been a friendly thing that happens. People say what's up to each other. They hang out. It's not that there aren't fights or anything like that. It's just there's a spirit of working together that is connected to other cultures, but also to that idea of struggling. And we had the last general strike in the United States was here in Oakland, right, in the 40s. And then you had, before that, you had longshoremen shutting down the port in the 30s, and a multiracial struggle that today, has resulted in some of the best jobs that are there, but also a group of militant longshore workers that will shut down the port for reasons of social justice. So we have all those things that led to, you had folks coming out here that redefined music, from Sly and the Family Stone to Tower of Power, to everybody in the 80s and 90s, from Tony to Too Short, to all those folks that and Tupac, and you got these folks who are on murals all around the world from Oakland. You go around the world, and a lot of these people that came from here and worked here and did stuff here, they're on murals around the world, and people and have affected culture worldwide. So I think all of those things kind of just led to this perfect synergy that's here. I mean, every place has some amazing things about it, but those are some of the edges that go here. Right?
Gloria, I actually would love to hear your perspective as far as like Oakland, like what brings it its flavor, what gives it its color?
I would say what gives Oakland its color is the murals themselves. When you walk around Oakland driving or taking a bike, you will see murals everywhere. And I think murals here tell both the story of the past and the present at the same time. They tell stories of people who were lost, yet people who were celebrated as well. Murals all around tell religion, but they can also just tell of how people dream or whatnot. So murals around Oakland, especially, when you go out, you don't see that many murals, but here, I would say what makes beauty and color in Oakland would definitely have to be the murals all around.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. And the murals themselves being there, speak to an idea of who owns this place, right? Like, there were a lot of fights about a lot of different murals, like where if you look through articles, I've looked through articles like in Oakland's history where people want to put up murals that talk about the diverse cultures that are here, and there was a lot of pushback against that, and to have public art says that this is something that we own together, right? As opposed to a world where you have some communities where they, like you said, they don't let you have murals, but you can have billboards that some corporation paid for, and you only can see what they want you to see, right? So it's, I think that's a great point.
Right on.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is C. My question, what excites you about music?
There's an energy there. To me, I like music that makes you feel alive and, makes you feel the contradictions of the world around you. Like there's something pressing against the way things are. Like I'm not necessarily, there's nothing wrong with it, but I'm not necessarily a fan of music where it's just supposed to be in the background, right? Where like you can go about doing it. That's necessary sometimes, and it's on sometimes, but I like music that makes you feel the here and now. Like we're here right now, this is what it's all about. And matter of fact, when you listen to it with other people, then you feel this connection to everybody. You're all listening to the same thing, and it's kind of like a rallying cry.
I mean, actually, before you pass the mic, like, what kind of music you listen to? Like, how do you feel about music coming out of Oakland?
It gets everybody together. Like everybody has an energy. It's like the hyphy moment. Like everybody, it was a whole movement. Everybody in the whole city just felt, you could just feel the vibe. It's like when you vibe to music, it's good. Like you could tell, like it's good energy and stuff.
Yeah, I remember I'm old, so I was talking to a friend of mine about when the song "More Bounce" came out, right? And people play it like it's an oldie right now, but when that came out, it felt like the future. Like you're and that's when I know it's a song is great, where you hear it. And it's not just like, oh, this is the good old hip hop, whatever, but it feels like we're seeing the future right here. And, so that, and we're seeing it together is even better.
Hi, my name is Ajane, and actually, I know we're at Fremont High right now, but I go to Oakland High. And I have something to show you. Before I came here, I was actually going through our library, and hold up, let me pull it up. Found this picture, and
that's a sharp young man.
With that picture, I just wanted to ask you about the culture in Ohio back when you went there, because I know it has to have changed a lot since you've been there.
Well, I don't think you could look at this picture and see what the culture at Ohio, because I was very strange. I mean, like I did cut my own hair, and so I'd be like messing up and trying to create new things because I had to cover up the mess up. And, and I don't know what I was doing with that. The collar turned up with the tie. I didn't know how to tie a tie, so I just did it like that. But culture at Ohio, it's funny. I graduated early. I graduated a year early, and didn't end up going to college for a year or two after that. But at that time, there was all of this trying to scare us straight, right? There was like, if you don't get, they'll be like, you can't get into UC Berkeley with an A- thing. So if y'all don't get your grades up, if you don't start doing it, you're not going to college. So a lot of us was like, guess it's not happening, right? And that was, that was kind of like, there was this this thing that was backfiring right then, which had to do with not seeing, all the creativity that was happening, all the intellectual discovery that was happening there at the time among young people, and trying to make us conform to a certain way of success, and because I'm not saying that going to college is necessarily the answer for everybody. It didn't end up being for me, but it is for some folks. But the point is that it ended up giving us a hopelessness, I think, the way that they did it. And for me at the time, I was being ostracized by the administration because we had at the time, this was the 80s, and there hadn't been many social justice movements around our time, at the time. I mean, I think there was, historically, if you look back, there was the anti-apartheid movement going on at UC Berkeley, but we didn't know anything about that. And this is like the late 80s. So we did this. They tried to have year-round school, which was going to put everybody on tracks. And when you're in 9th grade, they decide whether you get college classes or not, and you can't get off that track. So and they were doing it to save money on books and stuff. And they were doing it to every school except for Skyline. At the time, Skyline was still mainly white. And so we called for a walkout and just wrote it on scraps of paper, and then people were passing it around, and then right after that, we printed up flyers and passed it around. We didn't know what was going to happen. It spread even here to Fremont High, and people were talking about it, and we went out the gates. Everybody came out the gates, and I had the bullhorn, and our principal at the time was this ex-cop, this buff dude named Mr. O'Leary, right? And he comes out, and he was that buff. He always had his arms out, right? He was like, "Riley, give me that bullhorn." And this is the first thing I ever did, so I'm like, okay. And everybody, the whole crowd was like, "What are you doing?" And everybody rushed the bullhorn, and there was maybe 15, me and 15 other kids, trying to pull the bullhorn away from O'Leary. And he's swinging us all around like rag dolls, and everybody's "Don't let it go, don't let it go." And it cut this dude, Navin, it cut his arm, and blood splattered onto O'Leary's shirt. And at that point, O'Leary let go, and we walked down. 2,000 out of 2,200 students walked down to the school board, which was by Laney at that time, to the school district board. And right when we got there, they were like, "Okay, we're canceling it." So we were drunk off power. But O'Leary had blood all over his shirt. First time I ever saw a color picture in the Oakland Tribune was O'Leary on the front and saying, "Oakland High School students attack principal," and he's standing there with the blood on his shirt watching everybody go by. So that whole thing taught a lot of us a lot of things right then. And right after that, the administration took everybody that had been involved in organizing those walkouts into the office at the same time, and he had his friends that were police officers there in the office with him, and saying all sorts of veiled threats. Like, my girlfriend was Seventh-day Adventist, and they had called her pastor, and she couldn't see me anymore, all that kind of stuff. So that was some of the culture that was at Oakland High at the time.
Before we move on, I want to put it back to you. As a current high school student, what's the experience like? What's the culture like being a high school kid in Oakland?
I would say it's funny that you brought up how they were trying to discourage y'all from going to college, because...
Well, I wouldn't say they were trying to. They were doing a scared straight to try to get us to be like, "Yeah, you." Sorry. Yeah, we're doing this. You know, they were trying to get us to go to college, but
Yeah, I feel like their ways have definitely evolved, because now the way I see it is like the amount of resources that we have at the school to like go and apply to colleges, and like teachers, we have like multiple different classes where teachers bring it up like, hey, if you ever need any resources, we have it here. They'll have like specific lessons for each day, like maybe one is like planned on like how to like write your applications or do PIQs or something. So I would say it's definitely changed and made it like more accessible for us if we actually want to do it. And then if you don't, they make sure to give you different like routes and avenues so you can still be successful. So I would say they've definitely improved.
I'm Lorenzo, and I just want to go off Johnny's question. I go to Ohio too, and I'm just wondering, how did you manage to organize a student walkout?
Well, say I didn't do it. I helped do it, and really, you know, I had been going back and forth to these summer projects. So when I was 14, I got involved in the Watsonville Cannery Workers strike. Watsonville is down there between Monterey and Santa Cruz. And so I started seeing what was going on. We just go help pass out flyers. And then I got involved in these summer projects in Central California, Delano, McFarland, Wasco, that area, and helping where we wake up and we'd be there sleeping at farm workers' houses and helping them organize their union. Like, so they'd go into the fields and they'd be like, okay, you got to pass out these flyers, you got to plan the route to, you know, all these sorts of things. So things that I was doing there that I wouldn't have done here, because I'd be worried about how people would think about me if I was passing out flyers or selling a newspaper or anything like that. Things they wouldn't have been able to talk me into doing. But there, nobody knew me, so I could do that. Anyway, so by the time I got back into school, I was like, I'm ready to help make a revolution, right? I'm ready to be part, you know, I was in a revolutionary communist organization called Progressive Labor Party. And so I had all sorts of ideas about the steps that you go through to organize campaigns and all of that. And, but that didn't have anything to do with what happened, because they announced year-round school, everybody was fired up about it, and we all like huddled in the student commons and were like, what do we do? And somebody was like, let's say there's going to be a walkout on Wednesday. But now in my mind, from hearing about everything that was going on with the summer project, I was like, that's not enough time. That's only like 3 days. How, we're not going to get a walkout going. And so, it taught me a lot right there. And some people, I was like, okay, we got to get flyers made. And, I don't remember her name, but there was this girl that was just like, let's tear up this paper. Let's just write it right here on the, and write some flyers right now to get it started, right? So sometimes, that the question, like, how do you do that? There's a lot of preparation for something that gives you ideas on how to make something happen, but then there's always the new thing that happens that throws all of that stuff out the window. But what the preparation does is help you make plans, and so you're in the mode of making something happen, but you have to be open to the new situation. And so and really getting people to walk out, getting high school students to walk out against the threat of year-round school is probably one of the easiest things to do, right? So, so that was one of the things that was going on. But our goal was to also make people understand what that was. It wasn't just that it wasn't just about not going to school, but it was how they were trying to save money and at whose expense. And that's what the task was.
Lorenzo, how do you feel about youth getting involved, in walkouts and activism? Like, what's your perspective there?
Well, growing up, I did go to school in San Francisco, and I do remember in middle school, we actually did have a walkout, and we walked along Bernal Heights. I forgot we were chanting, but it was about gentrification. It was about that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jamise. I was just wondering, like, what made you take your creativity to a different level and, like, get you into directing?
Well, after I came back from that summer project in high school, one of the things that we were, the area that we were in was where the UFW had organized, Cesar Chavez and United Farm Workers, and this was a group that had broken off from that group and created another union called the Anti-Racist Farm Workers Union. So it was some of his leaders who felt that he wasn't radical enough, right? And doing that, but so in that were all these stories of Teatro Campesino, which was a group of theater folks that would go on flatbed trucks to the fields and make plays about what was happening and what the next steps were, and some of them would be common, and so we'd hear about those things, and we'd try to do some of those skits too. So when I came back, I was like, okay, I'm gonna be involved in theater. And at the time, there was something called Black Repertory Theater. It's still there, but it was in a little storefront. And so I joined that, and then I got involved in the school play. And I was like, okay, we're gonna make the revolution I'm gonna help that by making these plays and gets out to people. But I think like Black Repertory Theater was in a room that was about as big as this, right? And so the plays would be 40 people at the most, right, in the audience. And I was like, okay, we're gonna have to do a lot of plays to, make this happen. So at that same time, Spike Lee's movie, Do the Right Thing, came out. And it wasn't talking about the same things I wanted to talk about, but it was clear that he had an idea that he wanted to push forward, and that he was doing it through film. Before that, I hadn't seen that. I could see someone wants to say something, and they're making a film to say it. And so I was like, okay. So when I did go to San Francisco State, I went for film, and but that was at the time when there was hits coming out of Oakland, and every record label had to have somebody from Oakland, right? And I was also making music, and we got a record deal while I was in college, so I didn't finish. We got a record deal. So I told myself I could tell stories with the songs. That's why we ended up doing a lot of 7 and 8 minutes story songs, because I was trying to make film with it. So it was always the same thing. How do I make people see something in their head? What do I do to do that? So it's all part of the same thing. And so at one point, and it was always in my head that I would eventually do a movie. So I just got tired of saying I was gonna do it, and sat down and started writing it. I mean, there's a lot of steps in between that, but yeah. And just realized that it was kind of a lot of the same stuff where because I'm also the producer of the music, right? So a lot of times when I'm in the studio, I'm the worst musician in that room, right? So, but I have to get across my vision, right? I gotta communicate. This is what I want to do. Here are my ideas. This is how we're gonna do it. And I might have the guitar player that's thought of as one of the best guitar players in the world, but I gotta get them to buy into what I'm saying to do. And the drummer who also, thinks he's the best drummer in the world, and then a bass player. And so I got to get them to buy into my idea, but I also got to know the bass player might have something better, right? So I got to know, okay, that's better. We're going with that. Let's do that. You know, we're going to stick with all of. So I have to know how to work with people. Have to know how to communicate with people. I have to know when, you know, I have to believe in the best idea wins, right? Even if it's not my idea. Because you do the thing where some people are like, nah, that's, you know, they don't like anything because they didn't come up with it. And then, you know, you have whole ownership of something that's not as great, right? So I knew that in order to make film, I was going to have to use those same skills. And at first I was worried about it. Like, you know, maybe I wouldn't be able to pull that same thing off. But after talking to other directors and kind of seeing what folks were doing, I realized it was kind of all the same thing. You just have to have an opinion about everything.
Anything you want to add before we jump to Gloria's question?
No. Thank you.
Are you looking at getting into film?
I'm not necessarily into film, but I am a photographer. I do a lot around the school with photography.
Well, if I can ask, like, what is it about photography? Like, what do you see when you're doing that?
Actually, at first, I didn't think I would like it, but then it became like, it was an opportunity for me to like do something, and I was like, hey, I'll try it, and then it ended up being one of the greatest opportunities I could ever take because it ended up me being published in the New York Times. So, yeah.
What about it? Like, what about the photography?
It's just I like catching people in the moment, like you're happy, or like I just like seeing captured moments of people that I love and all that, and things around. There's a lot of beauty in it.
My question was, do you feel like social media capitalizes off of the day-to-day life people here in Oakland and kind of just plaster it all over, I guess in movies or TV shows, posts, newspapers, and, you know, et cetera?
Yeah, I think there's a capitalizing, there's also a distortion in the midst of that. You know, I think I talked about it earlier, where if you look at social media and the news, you would think that things are that crime is at some all-time high. But if you look at like CDC statistics, for instance, let's just take, there's a lot of ways to look at it, but let's just take for black-on-black murder. In 1950, probably who was an adult, like your great-grandparents were adults at that time, you know, there were 50% more black-on-black murders in the United States than now. It went up till 1970, to maybe when your grandparents were adults. And there were 75% more black-on-black murders than now, right? So, but the narrative is everything has gone crazy. These kids, they're out of their minds, right? And then also the context of what is happening is stripped out, right? Like the things that create what's going on. Like, you know, everyone knew that when there was a quarantine and you didn't give people ways to have money, that people were gonna have to, you know, bip and all that kind of stuff. But so I think there's a distortion of it. There's a selling of it back to us. And there's also a placement of social media as the middle person, right? Like, I don't know, and maybe tell me if I'm wrong, but it feels like for a lot of young folks, like there's not as many like, let's go to somebody's house and have a party. It's mainly happening over TikTok and things like that, that connection. And there's this intermediary of like, how do you prepare yourself to look a certain way or things. I'm not saying anything new here, but it seems like there's this intermediary that then distorts how people are with each other, and then causes people to feel a little bit more lonely. But I don't know, does any of that resonate, or do you disagree?
I agree, especially when it comes up to like people meeting up for parties and whatnot. Um, a lot when you see like parties, especially happen in Oakland, mostly team based, but you'll see it's like, oh, Oakland parties always got shootouts going on. They're dangerous. They don't know what they're doing. It's always something going on. When I'm not gonna say no, that's not what happens all the time, but it does happen. But it's just like it kind of puts a stain, I feel like, on people's lives, and also with homelessness as well. Like in Oakland, there's a huge problem, especially in East Oakland, with the homeless problem, and kind of people looking in from the outside, like my family or whatnot, or friends outside who don't live here. They'd be like, oh, Oakland never, they don't take care of their people there. They're messy, they're dirty. And then when they say that, it kind of goes on social media. So then it's like a whole echo of people just saying these things, when really, yes, we have these problems, but so do other cities as well. So do other people, That doesn't mean that we're this type of image, we're these type of people. It's like it's everybody, it's everything. Everybody's like this, we're not all perfect and whatnot. And I feel like social media really plays a big thing of like making Oakland scary and whatnot. When I moved here when I was 10. I've been here now, I think 7 years, and I can tell you it's not as bad as people say it is. Crime's gonna happen, but it happens everywhere. And I feel like social media plays it as Oakland's this dangerous, bloody city. You can't send your kids here, this and that, but it's really just not like that.
Yeah.
It's everybody goes through it in every city, everywhere you go. Not everything's perfect, but I think kind of the flaws of Oakland kind of what it makes it what it is. Yeah. It's not perfect, but it makes us who we are. It kind of teaches us life lessons here, day-to-day lives. It teaches us who we are, how we go out, how we present ourselves. And I would say it's kind of rude on how social media just kind of throws Oakland out there and just be like, oh, it's nasty, dirty. Don't send your kids there, don't live there. When I think Oakland has like so much culture, so much beauty. I think that honestly is so cool here. You can meet everyone around the world here just from being in one city.
Yeah. And the other thing about how you talks about certain problems on social media, like what social media and even regular news media does when they talk about homelessness, for instance. They talk about it as if it's a problem that is created by homeless people, right? and as opposed to looking at it in this larger context, because some of those same outlets that are talking about these problems as being problems that are caused by homeless people, they wouldn't support, say, rent control, which would stop homelessness, which stop a lot of, or low-income housing, social housing, things like that. These same folks that are putting this out there have an agenda of, they're not, it would be different if they're like, here are these homeless folks, this is why we need social housing, everyone deserves a home, everyone, we need lower rent, we need higher wages, we need all those things. They're not saying that. They're using that to put forth this narrative that goes along with that same loneliness thing, is that everybody's out for themselves, and that goes against, I don't even think that's the message of your generation. What I see from it is that folks your age are more and more getting involved in fighting for more power, right? But there's a whole machine against that, and it's, I'm seeing there's a bunch of sites out there, and I won't name them because I might mix things up, but there's a bunch of sites out there that are supposed to be, for instance, like Oakland I'll say one of them, Oakland State of Mind, right? Or Bay Area State of Mind. All they do, and a lot of it is distorted. A couple times they put stuff that I was there for, and I know it wasn't like that, right? And they say they're just reposting what the news says. And what they're posting is the same as some of these other things. And they have them for every single area, where they are feeding us a view of ourselves. And it usually is very different than who we are, like you're saying.
Who are some of the local hip hop legends you enjoy working with?
Let's see, E40. I've worked with a lot of people. Spice One, me and Spice One. You guys might not even know who Spice One is. All right. Let's see, E40, Spice. I've enjoyed working with a lot of people I've worked with and been at functions with that I didn't necessarily make songs with or anything like that. So there's so many folks that have, influenced and kind of made the scene happen that we came up in. And like I said, at a time when a lot of people were very supportive of each other. It was always like, yeah, we're going to do this. Yeah, we're making this happen. And at a time when there weren't a lot of venues that we could perform at, like a lot of these clubs that exist right now, they were only playing like things that they thought they weren't playing black music, right? And the way you had to do hip hop shows was rent out a union hall, rent out the auditorium at a school or at a church or a restaurant, and that's where all our shows happen. And in order to do that, because the venues wouldn't do it because they were saying they were scared of the violence, which was again another one of those things that was put. So you couldn't get clubs to book hip hop. You had to rent out these things, and so you had to get permits from the police in order to have your show. So at one point in the mid-90s, they decided no more hip hop shows. So, and because, if you had a cabaret license at a venue, they couldn't say that, but they had a ban on hip hop in Oakland. They did that all over the country, had bans on hip hop. And, so in the midst of all of that stuff, everybody was working together, and trying to help each other get their music out. So,
what's it like for you to hear that like hip hop was banned at some point, like pretty recently?
It seems surprising because hip hop, it plays a huge part in everyone's life, like especially from Oakland, because like that's when you hear Oakland, it's mostly like hip hop, like hyphy movement. Once I said before, and like it's just surprising to me.
I mean, about a block from where don't they have a Tupac thing at the museum right now? Maybe they don't, but they wouldn't let Tupac perform at the Henry J. Kaiser, the city of Oakland, right? Somebody who's known, renowned around the world. The thing is that now, and this is what I'm not necessarily into about all of this 50 years of hip hop thing. First of all, hip hop has been around for way longer than 50 years. It's something that's part of culture that came, it basically probably started, I would say, in Congo Square when slaves would be able to play drums on Sundays there. But besides that fact, there's this effort to make the old hip hop safe, right? When at the time, it wasn't something that was accepted at all. And so they're like, use that to like, oh, that other stuff from the 90s, early 2000s, that's cool. But whatever is getting made right now, that's not cool. Like we're not, they listen to it at side shows. They do, it's criminal. Whatever is happening now is the thing that's often criminalized, right? Because it's connected too much to people of color right now. It's all like, so in the 90s, the stuff that was safe was blues and, jazz, because it could be considered, they always talk about the old days when things were nicer, when things were safer. But they weren't nicer or safer in the old days ever. Things have gotten better because people have struggled for it, right? People have fought and hard for it. But so that's always the narrative, is to connect to this old stuff instead of connecting to what's now. And obviously I connect to the old stuff, but I'm not down with the like, I don't know what these kids are doing these days. I mean, I might not get it artistically, but I know that means it's good,
So I'm glad we're talking about music now, because this kind of ties into my next question. But as an artist from the Bay, you know that, and specifically Oakland, we have our own specific sound, and the people here rep it a lot because it's what sets us apart from the rest of the hip hop community. So I was wondering, as an artist myself,
are you saying the new music has its own specific sound?
I would say like the whole, like, from when Bay Area artists started popping up to like now, I feel like it might have changed, but it's always been distinctive. Like it's always been different from everybody else. So as an artist myself, like, I produce and I rap. So I want to know from you how it was for you when you were making music, and like integrating all these different genres like funk and disco into your music, like with still trying to keep that original, unique sound, and how like people took it.
Yeah. Well, the sound of the coup has never really fit into one thing, not even into Bay Area stuff. Like, it never, anytime I tried to sound like a particular thing, it didn't work. I knew how to do what I knew how to do. And it's funny that now that sound is like considered part of the Bay Area sound, but it definitely was out of place. There was no, it wasn't like it sounded like East Coast, because East Coast was like, what is this here? What is, it was just my influences, mitigated by what I could pull off in the studio, because I was still learning, right? Like, I don't like our first album at all. And so I even feel weird when somebody's like, your first album is my favorite album. I'm like, really? And, but we were still learning and figuring it out as we go. And like, as I realized, everybody is and was, right? So I didn't, sometimes, I'll say this, sometimes I had in my mind, I knew what I wanted people to hear it. So I'm like thinking, this is something that people might bump in their car. But I also needed it to feel brand new to me, right? So that's where some of my other influences that might make it different than other stuff would come in. And at first, I think I would try to hold those other influences back, because I feel like, oh, it sounds less like this or less like that. But then I embraced it and just realized that's what it was. I think at the very beginning, I spent a lot of time trying to sound like Ice Cube, right? I spent a lot of time, and I would get jealous of other people, like, man, that dude could sound just like Ice Cube. Why can't I do it? What's going on? And I'd be playing stuff my stuff doesn't sound like Ice Cube. People like, nah, man, don't sound like, no. And it took, and later on, many years later, I read this thing that made me feel okay about that, because, like, I was hearing about how Bob Marley was trying to sound like Curtis Mayfield. And he was doing the same thing, like, I'm trying to sound like Curtis. People were like, it doesn't sound like Curtis Mayfield, man. Just do your own thing. And then Sting was trying to sound like Bob Marley, and didn't pull that off either. So like, I think all of those influences go in there, but it's like, when I think you start hitting your stride when you just realize you're the person that makes something cool, right? It took me a second to realize that, like, okay, there is a balance of, okay, people like this thing. I know that they're looking for this. I'm gonna give them something that's kind of like that, but now I'm gonna throw this curveball that I want to do in there. And yeah, so that's, I don't know, that's kind of, you know, finding that balance of I'm communicating to people that listen to this language, but I'm throwing these other things they haven't heard in, and hopefully that gets them excited. For some people, they'll be like, I don't like that because it's something different, you know.
What about you as an artist? Like, how do you find your voice? How do you find your sound?
I would say I definitely related to a lot of what you were saying in the beginning of like trying to fit in, because me, I would say as an artist from the Bay, I realized, like I said, I realized the sound, but I don't fit in it. And one thing I will say before I continue, like you said that it didn't necessarily fit in, but it definitely, the music that you were making definitely fits into the Bay Area. Like I would say, like it's a foundational piece of the sound. But yeah, it's hard for me because I'm like, on one hand, it's like I'm trying to relate to my community in the space that I'm in, because this is what I grew up listening to, is what I listen to now. So of course I want to sound like it. But on the other hand, especially in the music industry today, you have to like stand out. You can't just be doing the same thing as everybody. But especially in a space like Oakland where the culture is so defined, it's like that's kind of like sort of frowned upon. It's like, oh, why would you want to sound different? Like we already have everything that we're doing set up. You should just like follow us. But what you said definitely has given me some confidence to be like, nah, I'm gonna do my own thing. Like I'm gonna still like, obviously I'm from Oakland, so I'm gonna still rock with y'all, but I'm gonna like go to the side and also incorporate some different stuff to let y'all like see what I'm trying to talk about.
You gotta be excited about it before anybody, because you're gonna be the person that is gonna be the main promoter. And so if you have a piece of art that you don't necessarily feel that great about, but you think somebody else will, that's not gonna be it. You have to feel excited. And for me, that meant doing new things that I hadn't seen before, or at least I felt like I hadn't seen it before. And so yeah, it's basically making sure you're making art that you're passionate about.
Yeah, thank you.
I grew up watching The Simpsons, and I just wanted to know, how was it working with them, and if they are really time travelers?
Yeah, Homer is crazy. No, I don't. So turns out the guy Matt Groening, who created The Simpsons, was a fan of the coup and had booked us on a couple festivals that he curated, and then I just got the call from someone saying that they wanted those. So I basically did all the work here. I didn't meet anybody except for over the phone there. Did all the work here and sent it in. So, but it was a cool learning experience for me. So, yeah, I didn't get to. The only person I met was the guy that was the writer of that episode, named Matt Selman, who's now the head producer of it. Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to know why you decided to make a movie about a black man experiencing code switching.
Yeah, well, I would say that's one part of it that's in the movie, but that's not what it's about. But yeah, so I did telemarketing before, and how it happened was, well, I did it while I was at San Francisco State, and then later, after we did our first 2 albums, like I said, I had gone into first doing theater, then going to film school with this idea of making revolutionary art that could help movements grow, help organizers use it. So after our second album, I was like, damn, I'm 24. I've been a damn artist all my life. What am I doing? Because that was, to me, gonna be like a little detour. And the original plan was, okay, I'm gonna sell 2 platinum albums, take the money and make like revolutionary centers in different cities. And well, we still haven't had a platinum album yet. So that plan wasn't working. And separately, we had a song that was starting to get played on radio, Fat Cats and Bigger Fish. And it was, and it was really just some label stuff where the distributor, EMI, had bought out the smaller label that it was distributing and decided that they had a list of who the radio should be playing from their, they pay for that stuff. And ours had gotten on there even though it had never been on the list. Like some mix DJs started it and people started requesting it. And so they basically stopped it from getting played after it was on there for like a month and a half. And at that point, I just felt real frustrated, like, I can't, what am I doing? Like I don't have any control over this. I'm putting all this work into it. So I quit. I quit doing music. And we made an organization called the Young Comrades. And we put an office right there on Foothill and Mitchell. And I knew I was good at sales. Like that was connected to my lyric writing and all that. Like I could do that. So I knew that I could do telemarketing and just work there one day every 2 weeks and have enough. I didn't have kids yet. And so I was doing that. And at that time, all sorts of, I was in there like, oh, this could be a good movie, And so, that was where when, that first came up about in my head about the different identities you have to put on, There's also something to be said about identities in the other direction, like, how I listen to some of my old interviews from like '93, and I'm like, I don't like the way I'm talking and everything. I could tell that I'm really like worried about talking like myself and not seeming hard enough or whatever, and I could hear it. I could hear it in the way I'm shaping my words and all those sorts of things. So, but the telemarketing thing is what, I wanted to do something in that world. So that's definitely a big part of it because, we'd be calling to Orange County and it was tele-fundraising technically. So we were raising money for a homeless shelter at one point, calling Orange County to very racist people. And so, I'd, put on the white voice and, tell people that, hey, the way you stop crime in your neighborhood is you give the LA Mission a bunch of money so that they can lure people away from your house with food. That was the that was my pitch, and it worked. And so yeah, all of those things, the way that felt, left ideas in my head, so that later on when I wrote stuff, because eventually the Young Comrades disbanded and I went back to making music. And so then, some years later, I still had that idea in my head. Was that, because you said it's about that, and I know it's been talked, but did that part resonate for you or anything like that?
It was really just like, what I got from it was like, yeah, like you had said, switching into different personalities for different situations, because I feel like I do that a whole bunch, because I'm different at home, at school, like just in different situations. So that was like one of the main things for me to ask about, like what was the main reason for like to do a movie about code switching, kind of. That was what I got from it.
Yeah. I mean, it's about other things, but definitely that is part of our lives, is dealing with identity and how we how we live in those circumstances. So.
Why don't you take us into our next question, Gloria?
So we've heard about the writer strike happening in Hollywood. Could you explain and go deeper into why it's happening?
Yeah. So uh, every 3 years, contracts for the different unions come up. WGA, which is writers, DGA, directors, SAG, which are SAG-AFTRA, which is the actors, and usually they have on a different year IATSE, which is the crew, and they'll come up next year. So with this round, we're somewhat making up ground for some past negotiations that had happened once everything started going to streaming. There were some folks wanted to fight for more residuals from the actors. So the residuals are, you know, in the old broadcast days, you'd get paid for the thing playing, but then you'd get paid again once it got played on the rerun, and then once it went to DVD, once it, you know, all those things. That doesn't exist in streaming because it's just there, right? And but they're still making just the same amount of money from those extra views, right? So in past negotiations, residuals hadn't been accounted for the writers. So that's one of the big things is people want, you know, an equitable pay for some of those residuals. They also, what's happening now is because of streaming, even though the streamers and the studios are making way more money than they did before, they have a setup where where people are actually getting paid less, just the way they orchestrate the way they set up the writers' rooms and all of that. It's not necessary. It's just once they went over to streaming, they were able to figure out a new situation where there's more output happening and more profit happening and less pay for writers. So that's one of the things. The other thing, you know, so people are striking over getting paid more, but there's also something that's more of an existential crisis that's being fought over, and that has to do with the idea of AI, right? The idea that that they will have a computer write a script, but the thing is that that computer really isn't writing a script. It's taking other scripts and coming up with something that seems like something new. So someone else already wrote those things, right? And also, when they do that, it also means there's some studio heads being like, we want a script about 3 girls that go to the waterfall, and then this happens or whatever. So you get just worse content, right? Worse films from that. But also, it's the kind of world that we don't want to live in. Right. So often technology gets rolled out to us. Like they'll say, you know what, we're gonna have it so that we can listen or watch at any point on your phone or on your computer. We're gonna know where you are. We're gonna have all this stuff, and that's just what the technology is gonna be. And they're like, we know you won't like it, but that's just how it'll be. You can write some articles about it. You can even make a movie about how terrible it is, but we're still going to do it. That's how all technology gets rolled out to us, and it's put to us as if we don't have any power over it, right? But the power that we have in under capitalism comes with our ability to withhold our labor, to stop the machine by not working and by making sure that they can't work either. So because the main contradiction under capitalism is the exploitation of labor. That's how wealth is created, right? So, and we know those with the wealth have the power. So we have the power to control that wealth. And that's what's happening right here is people are saying, what's often being said to the writers and to the actors, because the actors are also striking about that, about those two things, residuals and AI, it's usually just said, hey, you can't stop the way things are. But we know from history we can. Right now, the longshoremen, because they're the Longshore Union, because they're able to shut down production there, but when they shut down the port, millions of dollars are lost right away. So, you know, them shutting down the port, they usually win what they want right away because they don't, you know, the bosses don't want to lose that much money. And they could have a fully automated port right now. The reason why they don't have a fully automated port is because the longshoremen are smart. They're like, well, you're not going to be making any money while you try to build that because we're shutting everything down. So that's the reason why there's not automated ports, is because the workers are like, we don't want that. We, you know, and we're going to make it so that we're going to shape the way the world is. And so one of the things that's happening with the WGA is we want to shape the way art is made, that it's made by people. I mean, me personally, I only want to see art that comes from the passion of someone, right? I don't want to just see something, you know, and so much in music and in film, what gets pushed by corporations is, here's the thing that will work. Here's the song, here's the kind of hook, here's the kind of beat, here's the blah, 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 and you do these things and you'll win. And sometimes it technically does. And there are some artists that behave like robots in that way, right? That even though it's not AI, they're doing that thing because they're just trying to quote unquote win. They're just trying to get it, and they're not necessarily trying to put out, you know, they don't have something that they're passionate about that they're putting forward. Or maybe they do and they just suppress that, right? And so, but for me, what gets me excited is, you know, the passion of human beings. And so when you got, you know, an AI saying, well, this kind of scene works, and this does this, and this kind of a storyline works, you know, that's unfortunately also something that some screenwriters do. They know the studio's gonna, you know, wants this sort of thing, and they give them exactly what they want. And, you know, that's why people can flip, you know, scan through Netflix and see 1,000 movie titles that don't look good, right? That they don't want to watch, you know? And so, but this is just the AI is just codifying that into something that's scary for the future of art. And so this is really one of the front lines of being able to do that. It's also one of the reasons that we're striking is right now, I mean, right now there have been, in the past 3 years, 3,000 strikes and work stoppages in the United States. 3,000, and the regular news won't tell you that. And the ILB, I forget what it is, the official government board, the department that keeps the statistics, they won't tell you that either because they only count strikes of 1,000 people or more. So for instance, the strike in Sorry to Bother You, that was only 500 people. It wouldn't get counted, right? But so there are other places like Columbia and then paydayreport.com who keep track of all these strikes. And there's been 3,000 over the last 3 years. And so we're in the biggest strike wave that the United States has seen since the 1970s. People are figuring out how to have control of the world, over the world around them. And they're more and more, and some of these places are everything from fast food places to carpenters on the East Coast to, you know, people that work at movie theaters, to, you know, all these things just happening, right? And so this is definitely part of that, where, you know, writers have been affected, have been radicalized by the movement that's happening out there. where, and some of these things are not just around pay, right? Like, so the AI thing is not necessarily just around pay, right? And some of the other struggles that were happening during the pandemic, Boeing workers that make Boeing engines went on strike, and one of their demands was, hey, people need ventilators, so we're not going back to work until you tell us we can stop making engines, jet engines, and make ventilators instead, right? So there were things like that. And then you also had the teachers strike, right? Where they didn't just strike for their own wages, which is justified enough, but they also fought for, to get homeless services for folks. They also fought for parents and teachers to have control over certain budget issues, things like that. So there's this radical wave that's hitting folks, and it's just growing. And this is part of that.
What's the goal for your next film?
Well, my goal for all of my art is the goal for all of my art is to get people to want to be involved in movements that can change the material conditions around them. So I have a specific, I'm always hoping to make art that inspires people to not just take individual action, but to join organizations that and hopefully ones that are using withholding of labor as a strategy and tactic in order to win campaigns. So there's very specific goals. I did, while I was doing this last project, I also wrote 2 other scripts that I sold. So will be out in their feature film scripts, so I'll be doing those so once the strikes are over.
Okay, so for my question, you may or may not remember this, but in 2001, you said, last week's events were sympathetic of a larger backlash against U.S. corporate imperialism in regards to the 9/11 events. I was wondering if you could tell us why that's still true and like why you thought that was true at the time.
Well, so what you're referring to is on our original album cover that we made in June of 2001, or May maybe it was, of 2001. We have this album Party Music, and we wanted to make it to show that our music had the goal of destroying capitalism. And so we were like, how could we show that? And we were like, just brainstorming, like, oh, we could do it in front of the White House. We could have a drum machine making the White House blow up. The White House blowing up is like a cliche, right? Like, seen it in so many, and on top of that, it's not where the seat of power is, right? And so I wanted to be more clear that we thought that there is a ruling class that controls the economy and therefore controls, all political machinations that happen in that economy. So then we were like, okay, so Wall Street. So we actually went to Wall Street and we're like, I don't recognize any of these buildings. I don't know what that is. Will somebody know what that is? If we showed it on a cover, they wouldn't. But people recognize the World Trade Center. So the idea was that our music was destroying capitalism. We had the World Trade Center blowing up. And matter of fact, we sent it out to a bunch of magazines, and everybody was like, and with those magazines, they could choose to use a lot of promotional pictures, or they could choose to use the cover. Yeah. And everybody chose to use the cover because they were like, this is the best album cover we've ever seen, right? So the album wasn't supposed to come out until first September, but then it had already gotten pushed back to November by the time September 11th happened. So what that did was have people ask a lot of questions about what was going on. And so 6 months before that, the U.S. had been found guilty by the World Court of funding death squads that killed 13,000 people in Central America. And they've been found guilty and ordered to pay, I forget, X amount of $1 billion, right? The U.S. said, we're not going to pay it. We don't care what you say, right? And so they, won. So basically, they had thumbed their nose at the World Court, and at this point, after 9/11, people were like, if Osama bin Laden did it, let's bring him to the World Court. What no one was saying was the World Court didn't exist anymore because the U.S. didn't want to adhere to they said we wouldn't adhere to the findings of the World Court. And so what I was putting out there was that them being found guilty of that and all the other things that they never were found guilty of officially, they were involved in international killing squads, of which, the Mujahideen was one of them that they paid. And they actually had paid Mujahideen to go into Afghanistan. And what people don't understand is that happened, well, I won't even get it. Anyway, Afghanistan had a Socialist Party of Afghanistan. The U.S. funded people to go in after that and funded groups that ended up coming back and possibly being part of the 9/11 thing. So that's what I was putting into context.
Yeah.
Right there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
On the internet, some people say you're a communist, and others will say you're a socialist.
I'm one of those people that will say that.
So what would you say you are?
I'm a communist. Yeah.
No, that was quick.
I mean, and yeah. So yeah, the idea of socialism was, as a word, was put out largely. A lot of the socialist states that came about in the early 20th century were saying that they were on their way to becoming communist states. As a matter of fact, just to be clear, the Soviet Union didn't even always said that they were fighting to become socialist through their whole history until 1953, when Khrushchev paid Lloyd's of London back and then said, we're socialists now, right? So none of them ever said that they had gotten to communism, and they were right. But so the idea, communism is the idea that in which the people control, the people democratically control the wealth that we create with our labor, right? The power is that wealth that's created from the exploitation of labor, and the people that, I believe that the people that create that value, that wealth, should have a say in it. And I know that some people, when they say they're socialists, they kind of mean that same thing too. But because of McCarthyism in the 50s and everything, and its extension on up through now, a lot of people stopped using that word, right? And as a matter of fact, a lot of the world that I'm talking about that it's communist is what a lot of anarchists are saying that they're fighting for as well, right? But they shy away from that because they want to separate themselves from the mistakes that were made by other people who are fighting for communism or other people that were socialists. But when you do that, you kind of say, I'm not part of that, and often make the same mistakes. So, you know, the thing is to own the mistakes that you make, so you don't make the same ones, right? And also to be clear about what we're fighting for. So, you know, there are different ideas of what socialism means, and so that becomes murky to some people what they mean by that. The idea of communism is something that that I think a lot of people can agree on, even if they don't use that word and they know what the fight is for. That so. Some people will say socialist because I'm not saying there's capitalism, then communism. I know that there's that when you have a movement to create something that becomes a revolutionary movement, I know that there are stages in that, and I know that that we don't know the way that the revolution is going to be built. We don't know how that will look. We don't know what that is and what stages that will be. So, so some people will be like, oh, well, that means you're a socialist. But, I mean, whatever, I'm a communist. So, yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
As a young Black woman studying the industry, I often feel like people misjudge my capabilities or my intelligence. Do you feel like you've had a similar experience?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's like so many times that happens. So, right. So, but the only thing you can do, well, I can't say this is the only thing you can do. The only thing I can do is keep making the things that I'm making, and just keep being clear on it. I'm not, like. It's hard for me to get things done when I'm in a place where I'm worried about the mischaracterization that will be made of me, because I can't, I can't necessarily control it, and that's not an answer to it, but it's just the best way for me to keep doing the thing I'm doing. The answer to it is really not an individual answer. The answer to it is having a movement that changes the power relationships that cause folks that are in power for it to even matter what they think, right? I think. When I talk about embracing those things about myself. So, for instance, with being a director of film, there was often a certain idea of what it means to be powerful and what it means to know what you're talking about. And I don't necessarily aesthetically fit any of those definitions, right? And even my process and everything, the way I talk or anything like that, the way I figure out things doesn't fit that. I know that they're wrong, and I know that I have a thing that I'm bringing forward, and that me pushing ahead will put the thing that I'm making first, right? And put that out there. So I don't know if that helped at all for anything. Yeah.
Right on. We've reached our last question.
One audience question, yeah.
Okay. So why don't we go ahead and take a question from the audience then?
So you're an activist, a musician, and a director. When you have all three of those mindsets, how do you combine those into your art?
It's all one thing, that's all. And really just, gets divided up depending on what I'm doing, right? And it's like, I think when someone, an organizer, especially like, let's say someone that's a labor organizer, which I'm not, but, you know, if they're organizing something, you're trying to bring a group of people through an experience that allows them to see the way power works, right? So, you know, if someone gets involved in a strike, they then see, oh, these managers that said they were my friends, they're not my friends, they're doing this. You know, these, the police, you know, there's a dispute. Why are they attacking me instead of the, you know, business owner? Those sorts of things. You know, things get illuminated no matter what. So that's one of the reasons organizers bring people through campaigns. It's not just to win right there. It's to have that experience and to open up something from that experience. And so with my art, I'm trying to do a similar thing. Like, you hear a song, maybe it inspires you to do something, but it brings you through the experience of that song. I can do that a lot. You know, I can make you feel like you're going through an experience when you're watching, you know, my movie or something, because, you know, and that's kind of, it also is like, has to do with the way that I make scenes and the way I lay things out, because I want it to feel like what it feels like when you've gone through a new experience and you see things in a whole different way. So, it's, you know, like I've always, not always, but I think I learned to make art in a way that's just connected to how I am in life and how I think, how I talk, and, you know, and how I would make anything. So probably, I don't know how to paint. Probably if I painted, I would go with my same idea of what I think life is about, which is those things that I was just saying, you know, and I would have something that represented those sorts of things too. So I don't think of them as different. I think about it as like me, you know, you know, if I'm in the studio, I'm thinking, how do I want people to feel, right? And that's the same thing. And it's just, sometimes it might just take learning the particular medium I'm in, like what of this makes people feel this way? Like if I do this 808, what does that make people feel like? If I have this kind of snare versus that kind of snare, what does it make people feel like? So there's learning in that, and there's that in film too, like this kind of a wide, what does that feel like? If you're pushing in, what does that feel like? You know, this kind of dialogue, what does that feel like? So there's a learning curve from there, but it's still with all the same reasons behind it all. So it's really about, and I think doing any kind of art, it's about like connecting it to what you think about the world, right? And it's always important to have something that you're more passionate about than the art you're making, because that passion is what's going to make decisions, help that's going to guide you in your decisions about aesthetically what you do, and, you know, just in life what you do as well, you know, guided by, I want to do this thing, so therefore I can't put this, I got to do that, or whatever, you know, as opposed to if the thing is, I just want to be a musician, I just want to make music, or I just want to make film, then you're up against somebody's like, well, if you want to make film, you got to do this, you got to do, you know, like you're then you're then guided more by the forces that seem to control that art, as opposed to you using the art as an extension of yourself.
Thank you for joining us today on the Town Talks, and a special thanks to Boots Riley. Again, we'd like to thank Fremont High School, Oakland High, Oakland in the Middle, KDOL, and our host, Richie Nunez.
Bye.